Hello and welcome to Advent of Code 2023, Day 3, Part 2. If you don't know what Advent of Code is, it's basically like an Advent calendar. So if you ever, as a kid, got some kind of box and you opened one little portion of it each day all the way up until Christmas, and there was like a little chocolate in there or something, that's basically an Advent calendar. But instead, for Advent of Code, there's just a problem that comes out every single day leading up to Christmas. So therefore we get Advent of Code. And so really you don't need any kind of CS background. As long as you just have some problem solving skills like this says right here, you should be good to go. But anyway, without further ado, let's get right into it. As usual, we'll go ahead and start with the problem description. So it turns out that the gondola wasn't working correctly even though you thought you solved it. And so there's a little bit of a nuance to how we need to go and look through this file again. As you can see, we have 467, and that's adjacent to a star. Alongside it, 35 is adjacent to this star. And so what we must do is multiply 467 times 35. No other symbols matter in the file now. It's purely multiply all the numbers that are adjacent to a single asterisk and then put that into some sort of running sum. Over here, 617 is only adjacent to just this star, but there are no other adjacent numbers, so we let it be. Over here, this star is connected to 598 and 755, so we would multiply those two numbers together and put it into the running sum. So this adds just a little bit of a different way of going about the problem, and let's go ahead and just look at how we're going to solve that today. Let's recap what we did over in part 1 because part 2 heavily relies on what we did in part 1. Over in the main method, we read every line from the file, and within every line we go ahead and find all of the numbers there, and this is just an array list of hash maps. The hash map is just a string to integer value, and it holds a start, an end, and then the number itself within that hash map. Then for every number that we find within the line, we just check and see if there is an adjacent symbol. So let's go ahead and look at a couple of these things. We used a regular expression over in get numbers just to find a number, and then we look and substring out all the numbers from the line. We used another method called isSymbol just to check if something was a symbol or not. And then over in adjacent symbol, it just encapsulates 8 methods, which is just checking all 8 directions that a symbol could be. For our north symbol, which is very similar to all the other methods, but I'll just explain this one. So we're saying if the row that we are looking at is 0 or at the very top, then do not look above because there can't be anything above us, so we would return false. Otherwise, we're going to grab the above line and then iterate through all the number indices. So if we had like the number 100, we would iterate over the 1, look at the character above it, and then we look at the first 0, look above it, then look at the second 0, and then look above that one. If any of those characters above that number happens to be a symbol, then we return true, which ends up going into the running sum. That's the basic gist of what happens in part 1, but part 2, we're going to have to kind of parse through this file a little differently. What will make this significantly easier is if we stop using a hash map to store some stuff about asterisk, we're instead just going to create an entire class. We'll still have some sort of hash map usage throughout this solution, but this prevents us from having to use 2 different kinds of hash maps. So over here, we define a class asterisk, and asterisk just contains all the numbers that it's touching and then a bunch of Boolean values, in fact 8 of them, and that is just for each position that can be around the asterisk. At the bottom here, when we make an asterisk, it's just creating or it's just initializing that new array list. And then we have a toString method for debugging purposes, which this was just auto-generated by IntelliJ. I didn't make it. I just need something for debugging purposes. Over here, we're going to create an array list of asterisks. So we're going to build up a list of all the asterisks and see which ones have more than one adjacent number. So here we'll create an array list of asterisk, and we'll just call it asterisks. It's going to be equal to a new array list. Eventually we're going to iterate through this list and work with it a little bit more later. Just to recap, if you haven't seen how to read a file or anything like that, this is just reading in the file and returning an array list of all the lines in that file. So we create a try with resources with a buffered reader. We use buffered reader to read in the lines. So this first string line is going to be the very first line in the file. While that line is not null, we add it into the file, then we go ahead and update the line. And once we fall out of this while loop, we hit the return statement and we just return the file, which again is just all the lines within that file. We need to create a method that finds the index of every single asterisk, or what I'm going to now start calling a star, given a single line. Our header is just going to be a public method. It's static, so it's accessible from everywhere else. And then it's going to return an array list of integers because we don't know how many stars we're going to find within the line. And we've named it get asterisk indices to be a little descriptive here. So we're going to create an array list of integers that we're just going to return later. So we'll call it asterisk indices, and it's going to be set to a new array list. So we're going to go back to what was part 1 and just use another regular expression. So pattern P is equal to pattern.compile, and the regular expression it's going to be this time is just a backslash then star. We can't just pass in backslash star because it's going to think that we're just trying to find like multiple backslashes or whatever. This instead is saying, no, we have to escape this backslash, and so we're just only looking for a singular star substring throughout the whatever we're going to match against. Next, we need to create a matcher object. So matcher m is equal to p.matcher, and we have to use the line or pass that in saying, hey, we want to match against the line that we were given. Now there could be multiple stars within this line, so we need to continuously search for substrings of it. So we can say while m.find, basically saying while there are substrings existing within this line that I have found so far, we are just going to add the index of wherever we found it at. So we can just say asterisk indices dot add, and then we can grab that start index of wherever that asterisk is and put it into the array list. So we just call m.start, and that's it. We just need to return that array list that we made and we're good to go. We're also going to bring back a method from part 1, which is get numbers. This is just returning an array list of hash maps, and each hash map, it utilizes a string to integer key value pair. And that's just saying we're going to have a start, an end, and then a number key. And then those are just going to map over to the start index, the end index, and then the number itself. So we use a regular expression that's just looking for anything that's a digit, and there must at least be one digit. And then we're going to match that up against a line. Then we go ahead and put the start, end, and number into the hash map, and then add that into the array list of hash maps. And then at the end of the while loop, we're going to go ahead and return all the number locations. This is where the going gets a little tough. We need to start finding the numbers above, below, to the left and right, and consider all the diagonal locations of numbers. So we're going to start with a get north number. It's going to take in an asterisk, which is what we're going to update. We're just going to update those Boolean fields and its numbers array list to know what numbers we're looking at here and if there are certain places that we don't need to look anymore. We're also going to take in an integer row just to see where we're at in the file, and then look at the asterisk index to also further look for above and below. And then lastly, we're going to take in that file so we can look around the file too. So our first case that we need to account for is that the asterisk can be in the top row. If it's in the top row, then that means that there can be no numbers above it. So therefore we can just say if row is equal to 0, then we just return. We don't need to do anything here. Otherwise, we need to go ahead and get the line that is above this asterisk. So we're going to call it above line, and we're just going to do file.get the row, but -1. Next, we need to create an array list of hash maps. So array list hash map, that's mapping strings to integers. This is just going to help us keep track of all these number locations. And so we're going to call that find numbers that we used last solution. So we'll set it equal to get numbers, and we're just going to pass in that above line. Now we're going to loop through all of these number locations, and why we're doing this is we're going to look at each start and end index of that number, and we're going to say if that asterisk falls within that range, somewhere within the start and end index, then that means that we're directly touching it, like it is right above the asterisk. So we're going to do an enhanced for loop here of hash map string to integer here, and we're just going to call it a location. But it also contains the number, so keep that in mind. And we're going to iterate through the number locations. So we can say if the asterisk index is greater than or equal to the location's start. So we need to go ahead and call the get method and get its start, saying if it's starting at, if the asterisk is where the number starts or above it, but we also need to make sure that we're within the bounds. So we need to do an and condition here and say, and the asterisk index is less than, because the end index that we're given by the matcher method is exclusive. So we need to check one less than that really. So that's where we're going to use the less than and say less than location.get end. So we're going to check this condition. If this happens to be true, and I meant to put index here. If this happens to be true, we can go ahead and access that as asterisk's numbers, and we can add the location's number that we've pulled within that method. Since we have done this, we can go ahead and say, okay, we found a number directly above us. So let's also update this asterisk and say, hey, it's north, it's now true. But this number can span to the left and to the top right of this asterisk. So we need to check the bounds that the location is at and update the northwest and northeast accordingly. So we can say if the location.get start is less than the asterisk index. So we already know that it's touching the asterisk, but if it starts earlier than the asterisk above it, then the northwest is complete. So we can just say asterisk.northwest is equal to true. We also do the same thing for the east. We're just checking to the right, which is where the number would end. So if the end is farther than where the asterisk is, then that means that there is a spot filled to the northeast. So we can just set that to be true. Once we have found a matching number, we can just go ahead and exit this for loop early with a return statement. We'll go through get northwest number here pretty quickly. We're taking in the same parameters, the asterisk, the row, asterisk index, and whatnot, but we need to check if the row is equal to 0, which means we're at the top, or if the asterisk is at index 0, which means that we are on the far left. If we're on the far left or at the very top of the file, we cannot have a number that is to our top left. So therefore, return don't do anything. Otherwise, we're just going to get the top row, get all the numbers in that top row, and then do some checking on the boundaries again. So we'll do if location dot get the end, which is exclusive, so 1 over or 1 to the right of this number is equal to the asterisk index. Then that means that it is adjacent diagonally to our asterisk. So we're going to update asterisk numbers by adding the location dot get number, and then we'll go ahead and say asterisk dot has northwest is equal to true. Then we return and just say we're done, we found the northwest number. The get northeast number is a very similar method. Instead, we're just looking if we're at the top row, and then instead of looking at the very left, we're going to look to the far right. So we're going to say if the asterisk is at the far right, then we can't have anything to the top right of us. So just get out and return. Otherwise, get the above line, loop through all the integers that we have found in the above line, and if the start of that number is just at our asterisk index plus 1, then we have something to the top right of us, set the northeast to true, and go ahead and add that number into that asterisk. We'll also just quickly cover the remainder of all the other methods, as they are very similar or just derivations of what we just did for the north and then the top left and top right. So for the east number, this is fairly simple, I would say. We first check and see if we are at the far right of the file where the asterisk is. If so, there can be no number to the right. Otherwise, we're going to get the current line that we're on, find all the numbers on it, and then we check and see where the number is. If this number end index is where the asterisk index is plus 1, or sorry, if the numbers start is where the asterisk is plus 1, so directly to the right of the asterisk, then that means that there is a number to the right. We update the number over in the asterisk numbers and say, yes, we found an east. Over for west number, we do the same thing, just reverse it. We look to the left. If we're at the beginning, can't be any numbers. Otherwise, go and find the end of the number that's next to us or the closest. And if it's right next to the asterisk, here we update the west. Go ahead and add it to the numbers. South, inverse of the north really is, so we check the row. If we're at the bottom of the file, can't have a number under us, then we grab the below line. We get all the numbers that are below us. If that number starts and ends within where our asterisk is placed, or we're within that range, we go ahead and add that number. We do something very similar by updating the southeast and southwest Boolean values here too. So If the location of that number, its start, is less than where the asterisk is located, then that means that that number spans a little bit to the left and at least all the way to our asterisk. And then the inverse just goes for our end. It could keep on trailing to the right if we're touching it with the asterisk. Over on the southeast number, we do some similar checks. We check the bottom right, then we grab the line below us, and then we say, okay, is the start of this number equal to our asterisk plus 1? Is it like basically directly to our right and then down 1? If so, we can do a couple of manipulations here and figure out what's going on. And then lastly, we have the get southwest number. Same checks, check if it's at the bottom left. If so, get out of there. Otherwise, get all the numbers, then iterate through all the locations of those numbers. If the end of that number is equal to our asterisk index, but just one below us, like the line below us, then we do have a southwest number. We can put it to true and then add that number in over in the asterisk's array list. We're in the home stretch now. We just need to create this adjacent numbers method and then update our main method and we're good to go. This adjacent numbers method is basically just calling all of the other get north method, to get south, to get the southeast, stuff like that. So our first check, or really it's not even a check, but we're just going to automatically look to the north or right above it. So we're going to pass in the asterisk, the row, the asterisk index that we were passed in, and then the file up above. This is going to be very common for the remainder of all the method calls that we make. So let's just go ahead and copy that. Now get north number can set our northeast and northwest to be true. But if those aren't true, then that means that there's possibly a number to our top left or top right. So let's do some checks on that. So if the asterisk dot has northwest is not true, then we need to go ahead and run the get northwest and set and give it all those parameters. We do the same thing for the northeast. And so to complete the whole entire row above the asterisk, we just run these checks. Now we'll do something very similar for the south. So we'll first grab the south because the south can also set the southeast and southwest to true. But if those don't turn out to be true, we're going to manually check the bottom left and bottom right. Then lastly, we just need to run the east and the west, or the right and left checks. Once we have ran all these checks, the asterisk that we were passed in up above should have its numbers array list sort of filled. So we're going to go ahead and return the size of its array list so we're going to go ahead and return its size of the number array list that it contains to do a check up in the main method. Lastly, we'll return the asterisk's numbers array list size so that we can run a check up in the main method. This is the last part. So let's go ahead and iterate through all the lines in the file. And we kind of need to do this in the old-fashioned way by iterating with like an integer I rather than doing the enhanced for loop, because we need to know what index we're on, which represents the row. So we'll go ahead and create a variable called line that is equal to the file.getI. So that's the current line that we are on. And then we'll go ahead and create an array list of integers, which is just all the asterisk indices that we have. So we'll say asterisk indices, and that's equal to the get asterisk indices given the line. Next, we need to iterate through all the asterisks that we found. So for asterisk that is in the asterisk's array that we have filled up, or the array list that we filled up, we are then going to create a multiplication result that we're going to hold, which will eventually go into that running sum that we have. And we're going to set this equal to the asterisk's numbers dot get 0. So this is just going to be the very first number that we have in there, and then we're going to have a for loop. Then we are going to have a for loop that's going to start at the second index of this numbers array list. So I is equal to 1 and I is less than the asterisk's numbers dot size, and we'll increment by 1. Within this for loop, we're just going to say multiplication result is going to be times equals the asterisk dot numbers dot get I, or the current number that we are looking into. And then once we have gotten that multiplication result finished, we just go ahead and say sum plus equals the multiplication result. One last amendment here is I accidentally put the return statement outside of this larger if statement. If that happens, this method is all messed up. So you need to make sure that the return statement is within the if statement, because if the asterisk falls within the start and end bounds of this number, then we can go ahead and return. We should not just return after the if checks just one time, because if it's outside of this if statement, on the first iteration, the return statement hits and your out of luck. Thank you for watching. If you learned something today, then please consider hitting the like button and subscribing for more content like this. Again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.